Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes, and this is very important. We will discuss about cyber security. I know that different industry and academy, even the government, they love to learn more about cyber security. We have our world famous speaker, Professor David Schumacher, uh, Professor David Smith, as well as we have our core team member, Mr. Adam. I want to start from Professor David Schumacher, how you want to analyze the cyber security things, and if you share some good solutions with our Asia Pacific audience.
Yes, hello, Sharif, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever part of the world or whatever time of the day that you're reviewing this. So, cybersecurity obviously is a huge topic for the 21st century, wherever you live on planet Earth. Um, Cybersecurity, internet protection of internet connected systems, software, hardware, cyber threats of all different types. Uh, The movement of the cloud from business, even personal, has made cybersecurity much more important. Network security, cloud security, Internet of Things is coming on rapidly, and cybersecurity is a huge part of that. And then for years has been for application security, making sure that applications are free from malware and so forth. There's many things that you can do to personally help protect yourself. But what we're really here today to talk about is cybersecurity, I think, for the future and how that pertains to Malaysia, Asia Pacific, and the world at large. And maybe how you as a person can get involved in that. I mean, there are cybersecurity training courses, there are business courses, there are uh, certifications, which is an area that I've been involved in for a long time. There's government sponsored programs. For example, I'll put this in the chat. There are there's a program here in the United States. I think that's the right link. I hope it is, Sharif, where our government's offering free training to people to help in cybersecurity. Here in the United States, universities have bachelor's, master's, and doctorate programs in this area, and that is clearly a path into cybersecurity. But you don't have to look very far on the internet to find certification courses and to find training classes that you can take specifically to help you get into cybersecurity and apprentice yourself through the system. So there are multiple ways to go about this. I would encourage anyone that is looking at a potential future in some type of technology to look at cybersecurity and see if that is a good fit for you, because I can only see this expanding as we go forward. We've had a show where we talked about Internet of Things, and we know how expansive that is going to be. But just take a look at yourself personally. Take a look at the security on the computer that you may be using now or the cell phone that you may be using now to access the internet. These are points of entry into the internet where malware does exist. And it's getting closer to your body with things such as internet connected watches, internet connected rings, and soon I think far more commonplace you'll see things like interconnected eyeglasses. And from a transhumanist point of view, I think those interfaces will shrink smaller and smaller and smaller and become more personal over time. Cybersecurity becomes extra important in that regard as well. So take a look at that as far as an avenue for your future if that's something that interests you. And with that, I'll pass that back to Sharif.
Thank you, Professor David Schumacher, Professor David Smith. One thing we get in notifications that I think Facebook has some trouble for streaming Uh, this is not from our side. This is from Facebook side, but YouTube. It's continuing. So I'm sorry about that. Uh, Mr. David Smith. Yes.
Sharif, as David said, the area of cybersecurity is very broad, very active, and it constitutes many different areas of concern and interaction. Uh, you know, just kind of set a definition here. Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting your critical systems, your sensitive information from digital attack. And it is really not just your software, it's also your hardware, the other elements on it. It's also a person side of cybersecurity. In North America, uh, fraud is one of the big areas in cybersecurity you have to deal with. Stealing your identity, other elements like that. In fact, in 2019, um, it was estimated that fraud cost the global economy and cybersecurity over $5 trillion. Uh, and, that is larger than most of the markets of legitimate goods. So you begin to see that cybersecurity is a fairly broad problem and what needs to be done with it because the pace of cybersecurity attacks has continued to grow and they have continued to become more sophisticated. There's something called a zero-day attack, and what that means is that the uh, hackers already have gotten pre knowledge of patches and other things coming out to software and hardware. And they already have an attack plan when it's released to the public on the very first day, which is a zero-day attack. And those are becoming increasingly common. Um, let's just kind of put breaches in there too. Breaches have become very expensive, very common. Uh, there are breaches here in the United States that, when you look at the fines that go with them, as well as the cost, they actually go up into the tens of millions of dollars impact to the organization. We heard about the attack on Sony movies, how much that cost them. We see attacks on healthcare companies that cost tens of millions of dollars, uh, and others. Just to kind of give you an idea of the breach side, in the last decade, the percentage of increase of breaches has risen over 600%. So again, cybersecurity, cyber attacks are a thing that's escalating. I can give you some personal uh, experience here. My company, we run multiple websites. Uh, and yesterday I was looking through some of our statistics. On our 9 websites we have up today, uh, yesterday we had over 2,300 attacks on them. Our security systems handled all of those, and these are our automated security systems. But that's just to give you an idea that every website is being attacked. I can tell you on my home router here, uh, I probably get scanned 50, 100 times a day. And again, our security and layers is what protects us. You can't depend on just one security system to do it. The rise of ransomware has shown us that you have to have cybersecurity go in with your business processes, your home processes, the ability to do backups, the fact that you should not store your backup in the same place as your applications and your data is extremely important. But cybersecurity is a very fast growing field. Uh, many job openings. I know no cybersecurity company that I'm aware of can hire everyone they want to hire. No corporation can hire the number of cybersecurity professionals they want to hire, particularly cybersecurity professionals who have certifications. Uh, and the practice of cybersecurity, in many instances, is really exciting. Um, Last week, we were doing a due diligence on a company that we're acquiring. And my network engineer and I actually spent half a day running penetration tests, other types of tests, network in-house network security tests, and others for this company we're acquiring. And we found quite a few challenges. Some red flag challenges, many yellow flags, others misconfiguration and stuff. And I can tell you it will take weeks for this company to correct the major ones that we found. So it's something you should do. It's something you should stay updated on. Even though many of their applications are in the cloud, even when you have applications in a cloud provider, you still have weaknesses in your system because you most likely wrote the code that's running in the cloud. So again, it's a very dynamic field, very rapidly growing. Um, I could talk about cybersecurity for 2 hours straight, so I probably should stop at this point and let Adam uh, get his 2 cents in.
Thank you, Professor. Actually, we need your knowledge because developing nations need more knowledgeable person like you, like Mr. David Schumacher, and more talented people like Mr. Adam. So, Mr. Adam, how you want to analyze today's topic and what you want to add for today?
Thank you very much, Sharif. Uh, well, I think following the pattern of technological change and growth, following all this to the logical conclusion, it seems to me that technology that relies on systems that require and rely on cybersecurity will just continue to become more and more integrated. And David Schumacher rightly pointed out that we are on the cusp of the Internet of Things revolution, where full spectrum interconnectivity will become more ubiquitous. If that is possible, I wonder, even for me, someone who has grown up with information technology and the internet, it feels like technology is as ubiquitous and integrated into our daily lives like the air that we breathe. And I think it will be interesting to watch how legislation and ownership of data and information and freedom of data and information develops as well. One quite dramatic example is something that has already been around for a while, but music, in the world of music, sampling has become a now very commonplace production practice where clips from older music is reappropriated into new forms of music. So, with the continued growth of social media, with more photographs, videos, audio clips numbering into the millions and billions, do we really own anything that we upload anymore on an individual basis, or is it the big tech giants, or both? And then when we enter the age of transhumanism properly, and this global super consciousness that we talk about as a possibility begins to gain traction and becomes more of a reality, who owns what by then? Who will own what by then? How will definitions of individuality, cooperation, ownership change when that emergence becomes more of a tangible reality? Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, thank you. Uh, we have our new friend, Mr. Markley.
How
We are
you doing?
discussing, yes, we are discussing about cybersecurity. What you want to add today?
Well, like I said, just joining right now, but cybersecurity is a very important issue. Of course, a lot of folks, even here in the United States, have had to deal with it as there have been attacks of various sorts, and of course, even on my own personal computer, you have to be very aware of it in case there are different kinds of even attacks that might not even be international in nature that are might be attacking your computer and that you need to be aware of. I know that I use different things to make sure that you're not being hacked and that information is not being stolen and all of that. I know some people are definitely using Norton and other things, but I've even heard that some of those can be dangerous as well, depending on where they are coming from. So, like I said, try to make sure that your own personal computer is safe, but also try to make sure that some of the companies that you're dealing with are not having your information stolen as well. So that would be what I would add initially.
Thank you. Professor David Schumacher, and I want to give you thanks because you add one of the interesting thing, National Initiative for Cybersecurity Career and Studies, and like any of the students from Asia Pacific or professional person, they can get this training, or it's only for USA people?
Yeah, the particular link that I showed was for the US, I believe, but I'm certain that other countries would incorporate the same thing. This is cybersecurity is touching every aspect of digital life. So, as David Smith had talked about, this is very broad. There are many areas to get involved, from the personal level through small, medium, large scale business on into government. Everybody is being interested in this. And as I previously mentioned about it being the internet touching us more personally every day, it used to be that you would touch a network when you would go into an office building. And then personal computers came into the home. And then cell phones and tablets and uh, other devices, as I mentioned, like watches and rings, and soon to be eyeglasses that are connected to the internet, all become much more personal to us. So everybody is interested in this. I would encourage people that are looking at this, that are thinking about perhaps a career in technology, to consider cybersecurity and to look out and see what portion of that is of real interest to them. Because where their interest goes, they will put in that energy that it takes to really excel at this. For people starting on modest means, take some individual internet courses. There are many of them that are out there, and look at starting down the certification path, which David Smith also talked about. Certification is a major part of my breakdown. Before I had a formal degree in technology, I had many certifications because that's what the employers that I worked with really, really valued. So I would invite you to look at a company that I work with a bit and have for years, called CompTIA, CompTIA. They're an excellent place to get started with certifications. They have very basic certifications in computers. They have specific certifications in the cybersecurity area, one called CompTIA Security Plus, another one called CompTIA Pen Test, and that's for penetration testing that David Smith was talking about. These are all places that you can practically get started and start doing something today. They have formal education that you can take through them, and then there are many other third party vendors that are set up that will sell you books, that will, you can sign up for subscriptions for study material online. And if you need to, you can work with tutors and other trainers and so forth, both online and personally. So that's what I would think about for somebody that's looking at this, that really either wants to know more about cybersecurity or really wants to get involved with it themselves.
Excellent, excellent. Actually, we need that kind of content and that kind of support for developing nations. So, honorable speakers, if you have this kind of guideline, you directly can email President WTForum at gmail.com. We have our uh, very strong youth communities. Beside that, government officials as well as corporate person, even academy, they involved with World Talent Economy Forum, with our School of Talent Economy. You know, we have Academy, Al Noor Academy, Sarhadia Barhadi, the registered corporation in Malaysia. So we train people. So this kind of training actually very, very important for developing nations. So thank you, Mr. David Schumacher, for sharing this valuable thing. Mr. Markley, I think you want to add some point.
No, I had a question, and it actually wasn't a question. It was more of a statement. As we were talking about cybersecurity and everything, sometimes it can actually impact our lives in ways that we don't even think about, and all of that. I was actually talking to some friends of mine yesterday, and we were just reflecting on something that had happened to me recently and everything. Because as Mr. Shoemaker was talking about, it's so inclusive in our everyday life that it happens that sometimes we're sitting there going like, wow, maybe the computers know more than we want them to know, and all of that. Because I know that recently I was looking at my recent edition of a new phone and everything. It was actually a phone that was exchanged from a friend of mine, and I had uploaded everything into it and everything. And after about maybe 3 or 4 days, the phone told me, and yes, I did say the phone told me, hey, it looks like you are going to sleep at about 2:30 a.m. And therefore, maybe you want to get this and that in your life and everything. And I'm going like, wait a minute, how does the phone know what time I'm going to sleep? But then it occurred to me that the phone has a lot of information, and it is following a lot of things that you might be doing, like what time you're on the internet, what time you're actually stopping the service with the phone and everything. So if it's not active, it concludes that you must not be active. So therefore, it was telling me that I was going to sleep at that early hour in the morning. And as it was, I was busy on a project, so it wasn't that far off and everything in that regard. I think it might have been like maybe 15 or 20 minutes off and all of that. But I'm sitting there going like, wait a minute, this might be a little bit too much information for the phone and the computer to be knowing. So that can be a very much of a security issue. I know a lot of people are concerned. I mean, I'm one of those people in America that has been vaccinated, but I do have friends that are not vaccinated, and they have reasons, for whatever reasons, not to have gotten the vaccination. But there are people that are concerned whether they are vaccinated or not as to how much knowledge the government will have based on need of the vaccination card, the need of knowledge of whether you've been vaccinated or not, and all of these different mandates and everything. So there is a fear of there being too much centralized knowledge and everything. So I know that that is another concern that people have, no matter what side of that debate that they fall on, and things along those lines. So to my fellow distinguished panelists, I was wondering their thoughts on both of those issues, because I know that this is all Sharif's show and everything. But as I was listening, I was going like, wait a minute, I just had this incident with the telephone and everything. And of course, I've had this conversation with my friends, more those that are unvaccinated that are more concerned about the security issues. But I've heard it even from those of us that are vaccinated, as you know, there is a need, like here in America, there are corporations that are wanting you to show the proof. And even here, I'm not that far from Duke University, they had made it a mandate as of maybe a month or so ago that you had to show some sort of proof, which means that you're going into that lovely cloud and all of that. So I'd love to hear from my panelists their thoughts about this centralized knowledge, and how the phones and even Alexa can know a lot about you that we might not want them to know. But anybody on the panel got any thoughts?
Yes, Professor David Smith.
Yeah, I love the discussion, and actually your questions too. I'm going to touch on several points, but one of the points you made earlier, I think it's important to clarify a little bit more. You had talked about the importance of putting programs on your PC or your Mac.
Right.
Also important to put security on your phones too,
Right.
because they're subject to hacking just as easy. So putting security on your devices, though, are only part of the answer. If you have internet coming into your house and you use a Wi-Fi router in your house, you need to secure those as well. It's so easy. I have enough tools on my computer that I can see every Wi-Fi network around my house, or in companies, the same thing. And I can tell you, using the tools I have on my computer, I could probably break into even your secure Wi-Fi at your house within 10, 15 minutes tops.
Yeah.
So what you need to do is you need to look at a concept called layers of security. You want to start that security as you get the signal coming to you. So you want to secure it at your router, you want to secure it at your Wi-Fi, you want to secure it in your machine. And even to that way, I would also go ahead and encrypt your data on your machine at rest, because that type of encryption just makes your data more secure. You mentioned privacy. What I tell people is that we gave up any semblance of privacy in our life when we moved to currency from bartering. once we began to use a currency, we began to give up more and more privacy. And that's really so true today as you look at privacy. And we just need to assume, for the most part, that we have very little privacy because it's out there in all the tools and things. I mean, I go and turn off tracking on every place I that gives me the option to do it. My firewalls and my other applications give me an option to pass do not track. I That's my standard setup, and we begin to do those. So you begin to do it that way. But I also want to go back to a couple of things David said too. There's a lot of different types of certifications. An ethical hacker is one of them. The one he mentioned at CompTIA AI is a good one. But there's also a certified information security manager and a certified information system security professional. Those are two certifications that are fairly easy to get, takes work, but easy to get. They give you a handle of the complexity that cybersecurity really has. Because if I begin to once again go back and look at the elements of cybersecurity, it goes pretty deep. Some of the domains in cybersecurity is the infrastructure security, the network security, application, clouds security, the actual security of the information in itself, where you see things like GDPR, CCPA, and others coming into it. Uh, Business continuity is a big part of cybersecurity. Storage security, very important there. But the thing that gives you the most bang for your dollars in cybersecurity is actually end user training. Because if you look at the statistics in cybersecurity, many of the breaches are actually internal breaches. Uh, in fact, there's some real interesting myths you have in cybersecurity. One of them that I talk about a fair amount is the biggest myth is cyber criminals are outsiders. Like I said, they can be insiders. Another big another big myth is that the risks are well known. Well, no, they're not. There are new ones every single day, very soon. Another one myth is that, attack vectors are contained. That if I'm on a Mac, I'm safe. If I'm on an iPhone, I'm safe. If I'm on an Android phone, I'm safe. If I'm in a Linux system, a Unix system, the only ones that are attacked are Microsoft Windows. Wrong. All those systems are attacked. And you should exercise the same type of security you think about having on your notebook on all those other devices as well, because you really have to begin to go back and do it. The other thing that says, gee, my industry is safe. No. Even you at your home as an individual private citizen, you're really not safe because you're going to be scanned. And if they see vulnerabilities, you're going to be attacked. So you just need to begin to put in this posture. And that's why the education is so important. And the question that just came up, can identity theft be prevented? It can be deterred. If someone is bent on accessing your information, they can access it. I've done enough work with some of the intelligence agencies in the area of cybersecurity. I ran the Futures program at the largest cybersecurity, both uh, offensive and defensive organization in the world. And I can tell you, if you want to get to something, you can. So, Sharif, I think that's a pretty good one. You've got more people online, so I'll let you go ahead and go with them.
Thank you, Professor David Kelly. We are discussing about cybersecurity, and I know you are expert in AI. So, how actually AI can help for the cybersecurity? And if you actually there are more questions from audience, I will go to the audience question. But before that, if you give us some guidelines, then
Well, I think one of the just to kind of frame my response, one of the biggest problems is the use of AI in cybersecurity, and what I mean by that is the abuse that people use our information using AI to manipulate us. I think there's a lot of problems just with companies and what they can do with our data, and I think it's sometimes, well, I think it's causing a lot of social issues, especially um, in isolating us, where we the way the a lot of the advertising algorithms are working, they're used to isolate us within our community by showing us more of what we're interested in, and I think that's causing a lot of social problems. So from that standpoint, I think AI has been used in kind of a dangerous way. Now, that being said, on the other side of the coin, from a cybersecurity standpoint, uh, AI can be used with inside networks for adaptive responses to various threats and things like that. So there's some good AI can do, but there's also kind of a dark side to it.
Hey, David, I had a quick question about that. This is actually for anybody here and everything, but I know, and I see that I've got Mr. Adams next to me, and he looks like he's one of those millennials. I hope I'm not guessing age wrong and everything, or at least somewhere in that age range and everything. But that being said, I know a lot of folks in that space are very much involved and interested in cryptocurrency, what they call the blockchain technology, and the things along that line. And I'm not going to lie, even as a man in his late 50s, I'm very much involved in Clubhouse and some of those Clubhouse rooms and Green Room. But it seems to me that those kind of spaces are the kind of spaces that can actually open us up to cyber attacks and all of that. And I know that definitely the Gen Z and folks are looking more into this technology run money. So I was wondering y'all's thoughts about that, if this is not opening us up more to cyber attacks because of that. So I guess I'm
No,
directing it to Mr. Adams and everybody else.
I would say no. Cryptocurrency doesn't necessarily open you up to cyber attacks. In fact, I would argue that cryptocurrency adds a level of, can be used actually in security for valid. I mean, essentially, blockchain is a trustless distributed ledger, essentially, and in that regard, there's a lot of applications in cybersecurity.
Excellent. Mr. Dan.
Yeah, a little earlier than usual here, thanks to the time change. But good morning, everyone, from the back Pacific Standard Time Zone. David Kelly just brought up a great matrix that you have to think about with cybersecurity. There's actually permissioned and permissionless, and there's trusted and trustless. So you actually come up with a four-way matrix when you put those details in. And many a person has run afoul of the permissioned part of that with their blockchain assets, because they've stored them in what's called a hot wallet, whereas it's an online wallet. You've actually given your login credentials and password to the service like Coinbase or Robinhood or Cash App, and if there's a bad actor at those people and they somehow hack your password or hack your credentials, boom, you've lost it. So the moral of that story is, don't give out your credentials to anyone if it involves more assets than you're willing to lose. You're actually speculating with convenience over privacy, is I suppose the gamble that's going on there. But yeah, I actually did kind of a mini deep dive into this question of cybersecurity. I made a PowerPoint up, but I don't think I should. I'll just summarize it, actually. But there was the top 10 cyber attacks I found was kind of interesting. I could go over those pretty quickly, but to preface it, I would say that first we had a physical arms race, and in World War II, computing power was essential because it was telling us how to calculate ballistics trajectories to direct, artillery and kinetic weaponry very accurately. And then it became, it kind of morphed into crypto, cipher, code intelligence. Of course, there was a famous code breaking system called Bletchley Park that was in England, where they were actually intercepting the German encoded messages, but they weren't letting on that they were intercepting the messages. And they did this with the help of probably one of the most amazing computer minds ever, Alan Turing, who actually invented the concept of a Turing machine, which is a universal sort of computer. And he ran a code breaking system called Colossus, which was actually kept secret for like 20 years, but it used high-speed tapes to read these possible codes that were coming in through the German Enigma encryptions, and very fascinating. So you can see kind of how the physical arms race of atoms starts to morph into a digital arms race of bits. And I think we're well into this digital crypto attack battlefield, and it's only going to get more pervasive. It's reaching across all sectors, whether you're a state actor or a civilian. It's something we have to deal with, and one way to deal with it, as I said, is don't give your credentials out just for the sake of convenience, and back up. Mission critical data, back it up off-site. Have a regular backup plan going, because it's not a question of when you will lose your data. Or if you will lose, it's when you will lose. It'll either go down through mean time between failures, hard drives crashing, or you will get hacked. I mean, even the Israelis' software, infamous Pegasus software, they can install on a phone, and it becomes a keystroke logger. They can see exactly what you're doing with your phone if this software gets installed there. So anyway, the real quick to go over the top 10, there was malware, which is, of course, stands for malicious software, and this can sometimes be put on by clicking on an innocent looking link if the computer is set up where it will automatically run a script. Second is phishing attacks. That's spelled PHISH. I guess that's a little nod to the phone freaks of the 60s era. And it's interesting, there's several types of phishing attacks. There's spear phishing, which is targeted at specific companies or individuals. There's a phishing attack called a whaling attack, which is kind of funny, which targets the big senior executives and stakeholders. Farming, PHARMING, that's leveraging domain name server cache poisoning to capture user credentials through a fake login page. So if you see a page that looks convincing, double check on that. They can also do social engineering, where you get a phone call like, "Oh, this is so and so down at this branch. I need this information," and many people have been hacked with the simple human frailty method. In fact, I think the way the Stuxnet virus was actually spread into the Iranian bomb making factory that ran their centrifuges up, they actually did that with a USB drive that was identical to the one person who worked at the factory had, and he innocently assumed it was his drive, and when it had been swapped out in kind of a James Bond operation, and they plugged it into their centrifuge computer, and everything was done from downhill from there, set him back a few years. And speaking of being set back a few years, it's estimated that World War II would have actually lasted 2 or 3 years longer if it weren't for the code breakers of Bletchley Park. Anyway, number 3 attack is called a man-in-the-middle attack. That's sort of where you think you're talking to the trusted Wi-Fi router or whatever, but it's actually been swapped out. Number 4 is, you might have heard of the denial of service attack, where you just flood a system with traffic and it overloads it. And there's also distributed denial of service attacks. Basically saturates the incoming stack of communications. 5 is a SQL injection attack. That's a little. It's just people using server query language. You can inject a parameter that gets some malicious code. 0-day exploits we've talked about. That's when there's a known vulnerability that's been announced, and before you have time to install the patch, there are 0-day exploits trying to sneak in under the radar. 7th most common cyber attack, password attack. Again, I mentioned the Pegasus software that does keystroke logging. I think that's a pretty common thing to have running in the background that you may not know about. Your keystrokes are getting captured, and if that's happening, your login credentials are getting captured. 8 is called a cross-site scripting attack. Again, that's some kind of esoteric where you have code up in the browser address that gets run and inserts malicious code. Okay, rootkits. We may have heard of rootkitting. That's where it actually works at like the firmware level of your phone to change the way the operating system works. And the last most common attack, sorry I'm being so long-winded here, is an IoT attack, Internet of Things. And apparently an interesting thing is here, there was a Vegas casino that was actually successfully hacked. Guess how? The thermometer on the casino fish tank was an Internet of Things device. And through that, they gained entry to the whole network. So yeah, update your OS, keep your passwords strong. The bottom line is have procedures in place, enforce them, keep your firewalls up to date, back up your systems, watch out for breach systems. And yeah, this is a great job market to get into. I mean, they say that it's only going to grow. There's a shortage right now of computer security professionals. I'm actually enrolled in a California online community college course on an information security track. And the prerequisite is the A+ certification. So I'm going to be getting that and then going on to the computer security CompTIA track that David mentioned. Excellent group. So that's my...
Hey, Sharif, really quickly, Sharif, I had a question for you, and it's actually to Dan and any of your students and everything, but I will admit once again my age and everything, being in my late 50s, 59, I'll hit the big 6 next year and everything, but still very much in that single space. And I do know that there are other folks in that single space as well, particularly our young people, but not exclusively our young people. And I do know that sometimes the cyber attacks can come in from that direction as well. So I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about that, because unfortunately that's where a lot of the cyber criminals like to find entry into your life and the things along that line. So I'd love to hear folks' thoughts around that concept, because I do know that I've seen some people that have done, and I heard somebody mention fishing. They have tried to fish both in the sense of fishing in the sea for singles, but also fishing in the sea for targets as well. So I'd love to hear folks' thoughts on that. Maybe I'll direct that to Mr. Adams as well, since he's in that
Yes.
early 30s, and I had asked him that earlier question. But any thoughts around that and everything?
Okay, Mr. Adam. Then I think anyone can add. Mr. Adam.
Well, thank you, Sharif and Mr. Mark. When you were talking about cryptocurrency earlier, I'm actually very embarrassed to admit that I am at a disadvantage when it comes to Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and Ethereum. Why? It's something I haven't managed to get a grip on yet, unfortunately. So that's something of a disadvantage for someone in my age group, I guess. But never mind. When Mr. Mark Lee was talking, he reminded me of the subject of politics, and of course that touches a subject I've brought up numerous times throughout this show, and that is privacy, which Mr. David Smith also spoke about. And as he was talking, he reminded me of a talking point mentioned before. I can't remember if it was David or Rob Enderley, but it was an interesting talking point that illustrates the issue of privacy. And however, since we started living in villages, with the compromises that come with living in villages with regards to privacy, every village has village gossips and nosy neighbours, and the chances of you living next to a neighbour who is nosy or having no neighbours either side of you, well, like I said, that's the risk of living in small living settlements where people get bored and have things to do and they gossip, and you get keeping up with the Joneses syndrome. But analytics, I have nothing to hide. Maybe have some contrarian views and fringe interests, but nothing to be ashamed of. But it would still be nice to not be analysed so in depth when it comes to analytics, your interests and your likes and your dislikes. And my biggest fear is that someone at CIA or Mossad thinks I'm a loser because they can see I am into this or that I don't do this like normal people. So that's my biggest fear rather than being seen as a terrorist. Something else Mr. David Smith said, the way he described it, we gave up privacy since moving from bartering to currency. That compelled me. We gave up, which for me highlights the issue of consent as it comes to technology and societal change and progress. Can someone who does not possess much technical knowledge truly consent to having their lives changed and upended by technology until they realize, wow, I don't like living like this? But then it's certainly too late. It's already integrated into not just your own life, but everybody's lives. Or can they consent as much as someone who has more knowledge, more superior knowledge, more nuanced knowledge? Would someone who did have possession of more technical knowledge be in a far better position to decide whether to freely accept new technology into their life? Can there even be gradations of consent, or is it binary where you are either able to accept or refuse consent or not? So that is reminiscent of Mr. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who seemed to have a deep understanding of technology and its implications, so chose to opt out because of that understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. There are some questions from audience, and I believe Mr. David Schumacher, you want to respond some questions. This is the question from Onika Shams.
Yes,
What step will anyone take to secure a server? Yes.
yeah, I'll take that one from the standpoint that I've been server administrator, systems analyst, systems engineer for years and years. And this question leads into a direction that I wanted to steer the topic as well. So, securing a server is doing the fundamentals of security. In other words, you have a standard, you have a template that says this is what we need to effectively be able to use this server in our data center. So you would go in and you would turn off, if it's a physical server, once you build the system, you physically go in and turn off any services, ports, anything that isn't necessary to the operation of that server. And then to be certain, you'd scan that. And then once it's placed into use, all of your servers get regularly scanned and monitored to see if anything changes. So securing a server is not an event, it's more of a continual show. You do the initial fundamentals and then you monitor that. Now, taking on the course of fundamentals, I want to talk about the fact that the news, Hollywood, television shows show a lot of things about cybersecurity in a very dramatic and focused way. They have a drama or they have some way that they want to gain your interest. And that's where the public spotlight goes. The public spotlight may go to big name companies that have a breach or a government that has a breach. And people look at those and we focus on those. And we have to remember that we humans are pretty great, but we have some built-in fallacies. And one of those is the spotlight fallacy. We see through this thin little spotlight and we ignore everything else. If you do that as somebody working in the cybersecurity field, keep in mind that hackers are looking outside the spotlight. Okay, they're working in the dark. They're working around the edges to get into the systems. So we can't become so focused on what's the latest thing that's happened, what's the latest drama that's happened, what's the biggest news that happens. It always goes back to the fundamentals. If you played sports, okay, you may learn some very fancy plays, some very fancy techniques. And if your team starts having issues, every coach that I've ever worked with took you right back to the fundamentals and started building again. And cybersecurity is no different in that regard. So fundamentals on a server, fundamentals on your data center, fundamentals in the cloud, everywhere. Fundamentals are important.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. There are more questions from audience. So, if you respond on Madam Alea, so yes, what are some of the common cyber attack? Yes.
Let me
And
answer before I jump straight into that one. Actually, let me add one thing that add on to what David said there. There's a lot of free attack tools out there. There's an organization called OWASP, OWASP, and some of their scanning tools, like their ZAP scanning tool, is a free, very comprehensive penetration tester that is easy to use and one I would recommend for people who want to secure their servers and their websites and things to run fairly often. So now to answer the question from the audience, there's all different types of attacks and things that are going on. The most common attack is one where people use social engineering things to try to take over your identity. You know, we've seen emails that says, "Gee, your mailbox is full. Click on this link and give me your username and password so we can go fix it." Or you have a problem on your bank account and it's coming from American Express, but then you look up at the email and it's an email from the Congo. And, you know, that's probably not American Express. So you begin to say, and that is actually the most common way. In North America, that type of attack accounts for over 35% of all the cybersecurity attacks that happen in North America. The other type of attack is a malware, where they are putting viruses, Trojans, spyware on your machine. You begin to see, like I said, the insider threats, which are very large. You begin to see something called DDoS, which is distributed denial of service attacks. This is where they're trying to disrupt you and take the other elements out. There's something called an advanced persistent threat. That threat is one where people have put software agents on your network, on your machine, not to do damage to you, but to steal your information. And they do that in a way. I was CEO of a company where we had a contract to run the security network operating center for the state of Texas. And so we had to do security testing on all the state agencies, all the computer centers, all the networks. And we had one state agency who actually went back and lobbied our legislature to be exempted from us doing security compliance with them. The legislature told them, forget it. The executive director called us in and was, let me say this way, very rude, told us things, and he's told us, my system is 1,000% secure. There's no way you will ever get anything off my system. And you never tell an ethical hacker, there's no way you're going to ever get into my system. And we got in multiple ways, but one of the other ways you have to protect yourself is against that social engineering. And that's one of the ways we attacked him. We bought about 20 of the, at that time, new Microsoft wireless mice that curled and bent up and was open in the middle. And we sent those as gifts to 20 employees of this state agency. And they were wireless, so they had that little device you plug into the sides, which is the wireless receiver, which actually had enough space on it that we were able to put a few lines of code in that wireless receiver. And of those 20 gifts, 18 of those gifts called home, and we were able to 100% take over the network of that agency. We took over their DNS server, we took over their Exchange server. I was able to put in the report on them, pictures of emails from the executive director's Outlook folder. We were able to put pictures of his desktop in the final report. So you begin to need to do those things. Just a couple of last ones on the threats, though. One of the newest threats, and it is probably the one with the highest growth vector right now, is ransomware attacks. And ransomware can be from where they're locking you out of your data. They're locking you out of your applications. We have seen ransomware payments, typically in cryptocurrency, from a few $1,000s to tens of millions of dollars to be able to. And even when you pay them, it doesn't mean they're going to unlock your data. And what's one of the most interesting trends to me on that is one of the largest bad guys doing ransomware was attacked by another cyber criminal group. And so that cyber criminal had a ransomware attack against their servers, and they lost their data. To a group of cyber criminals lost their data to another group of cyber criminals. That is how widespread ransomware attacks are today. So again, a lot of different ways to attack and do things. But I will say this, the best thing to do with your cybersecurity protection is to do it in layers and build multiple layers. And your business continuity, your backups are an important part of your cybersecurity as well. And it is probably the most overlooked of all of them. I mean, everyone listening to your show should ask themselves, when was the last time I did a backup of my data on my computer, on my notebook, on my phone? All of those need to be backed up pretty often.
Hey, folks, I've actually got to bounce because like I said, I'm actually liking the
Mr.
9 o'clock
David,
time over here and everything because it works better for me here on the East Coast with the daylight savings time and all of that. I know you California folks might not be wanting to get up at 6 in the morning, but 9 actually works better for me and everything. So I'm geared to bounce because I've got some other duties to take care of and things of that nature. But hopefully I'll see some of y'all if Sharif invites me either tomorrow or on Friday, because I do know tomorrow is Veterans Day here in this area and all of that. But if Sharif invites me, I will probably be here at least for the first 30 minutes or 40 or something along those lines. But I am getting ready to bounce right now, and it's been a pleasure meeting you. I know that Dan has got me on LinkedIn, and if anybody else wants to find me on LinkedIn or any of the other platforms, I am always glad to have those conversations. And as I mentioned before, I'm active on the Clubhouse as well. So if y'all look for me there, I will lovely to see y'all that I don't know as my friends and all of that. So on that note, I'm going to get out of here. Sharif, it's been real. It's been fun. And I hope to see you on tomorrow.
thank you, Mr. Markley. Thank you. Mr. David Kelly, there are some other questions from audience. If you want to respond, this will be interesting. Noor Fazrin, her question is about how can identify the theft be prevented? And yeah, same question actually from Mr. Adnan Kondokar. So yeah.
Well, I mean that's kind of the trick. You know, there's a number of things you can do, like with locking your credit. You can you just make sure that you know have secure passwords. Don't fall prey to all the phishing accounts. You know, like someone was talking about all the emails people get and they look all official, but then you look at the links and the domains are some Timbuktu. You know, this kind of stuff. You know, you have to learn what the internet is like, and then you can take further action to secure that. There's you know, locking down your credit, which makes it really hard for someone to steal your identity. Not that it's impossible. You, for the most part, if you're connected to the internet, you're at risk. But there's actually more extreme measures that you can take I think for the most part, it's just a matter of common sense. Don't fall prey to things like phishing attacks and email scams, and change your passwords, use two-factor authentication, and lock your credit so people just can't do anything unless it goes through you.
Thank you. Mr. Dan.
Yeah, there's an interesting observation that someone once made. It went something like, when the government knows more about you than you know about yourself, you've got a serious problem. That's kind of reminds me of Robert Heinlein, the science fiction writer, said, when the government requires identity cards, it's time to move. But as David was saying, as soon as we switched from barter to currency, I guess it was inevitable that we were going to surrender our privacy information into the commons, as it were. So we don't have to, retreat to become hermits and Amish people. We could actually take rational steps to retain our security and our privacy and our safety. There's actually an interesting project that looks to create sort of a super stripped down and super private computing experience that would function actually as its own separate kind of network. It's called Urbit, Urbit. They actually have the concept is to have a personal cloud, and also your little personal cloud is a distributed computer with this network. It's relatively new project, but it's really interesting because the entire operating system compiles down to just 33 lines of code, which is almost unheard of for simplicity and stripped down. It's almost reminiscent of like the Apollo computer that landed the Apollo mission to the moon. That actually had 4K of rope memory that was knitted by little old ladies. They call it the LOL memory because they had to build something that would be immune to the cosmic radiation that could wreak havoc with traditional circuits. So it was actually a little tiny magnetic donuts with sense wires, and could flip the magnetic fields. Anyway, we might be going back to something like that if the larger internet becomes too pervasive and invasive and too run away. I actually think we should have very robust, super secure backup networks that can be used when the main networks go down. And actually, we have so many mission critical, civilization critical systems connected to things like SOTA that are very easily hacked. We can find utility scale disruptions happening. Ted Koppel wrote a book called Lights Out, which would be about if we had a power grid failure, it would actually take potentially years to replace some of the giant transformers that run the power grid. And in the meantime, it could be that we would need something like cannibal recipe books because we wouldn't be faring so well as all the systems of modern life. The food stops getting delivered, the water stops flowing, etc. I mean, you can, not to be morbid, but something like 90% casualties within 6 months are speculated to happen if we get a major electric grid failure or some other kind of grid failure. So cybersecurity is a warfighting domain. It's actually there are cyber commands to deal with this problem. I think it should happen at the neighborhood level. I'm an amateur radio extra class licensee. I think the ham radio community, you can learn that online for free. You can get CERT training, which is the civilian arm of FEMA that they depend on and to help supplement their efforts. Learning CERT and FEMA would be a great cybersecurity move in its own way, because you're not going to be caught, in the lurch when there is potential mass disruption of the grids of civilization, as I say. Anyway, as we move into things like brain-computer interface, all these threats of cybersecurity are going to get even more hairy. Can you imagine all these threats that are currently air-gapped now, which means they involve a human interface person to push the button? If we have things like direct neural interfacing, I think that's going to be a really Wild West territory. So keep aware of the developments on this. We may be just a decade or two away from the technological singularity, and none of this may even be comprehensible in a couple decades. But I'm glad to be surfing the waves that are out there now on it. So back to you, Sharif.
Thank you. Professor Rob, thank you for joining today. We are discussing about cybersecurity. So what's your views about the cybersecurity?
Well, so let's talk about security a bit as a framework. The security is more of a state of being than anything that's absolute. You feel secure regardless of whether you are secure based on your surroundings, and everybody wants to feel secure. The security industry largely uses that to sell you on technology. It's an insurance sale. The more unsecure you are, the more likely you are to buy a security solution. But the thing to remember is that security in and of itself, security software, hardware, training, each one of those things provides a level of security, and what gets you secure is multiple levels, multiple layers. The layer that we forget the most is the human layer. People are our largest security threat. Somebody that clicks on a link that they shouldn't, goes to a website they shouldn't, ignores security bulletins and doesn't do timely updates. Those are the folks that right now create the greatest exposure, at least from the standpoint of people we control in the industry. And then outside, in terms of attackers, we have attackers that used to be students that were studying technology and had too much time on their hands. That migrated to criminal organizations who fortunately were, at least in the early days, not very technically competent. And most of those folks still attacked through people as opposed to through technology. The big concern now is we've got state actors, large countries, including our own, that regularly develop technology to breach security. And the smarter that technology is, the higher the danger that'll get out of control. You might recall there was an attack by Israel on Iran on their nuclear program, and that software escaped and started doing damage across the rest of the world. And that's one of the big dangers we have now. The latest effort to fight these much higher level attacks is to use artificial intelligence. Create a program that doesn't specifically look at breaches, just simply looks at behavior. Typically, when somebody's trying to steal something or do damage, they're doing something that is unusual for the company. If somebody suddenly, say a secretary suddenly starts looking at all the records for all the patients in a hospital, chances are that's not the secretary, that's an attacker. And that's what an AI program does. It looks for behavioral anomalies and then it flags them. So, an executive that only does email is suddenly perusing all the accounts of customers. That's a good chance that they've been compromised, their password and ID have been stolen. Now, talking about passwords and IDs, so this is one of the most frustrating things for me, and I've been in and out of security for much of my career. I started off in Pinkerton's, wore badge as a sheriff for a period of time. I owned security on and off, both in development and in IBM. And I used to be a security auditor. And the thing that we discovered back in the 1980s, and this is an IBM, and while they were still dominant, was that passwords were unsecure by design. They were the greatest exposure we saw, and the decision was made at that time to discontinue passwords, and if possible, discontinue IDs that connected you to the individual. We still have the IDs. We're just now getting around to trying to get rid of passwords. really we have this exposure for so long. And what we discovered with passwords is you had a choice. You could have a simple password that people would remember, or you could have a complex password that nobody remembered. And then what they do with those passwords, they'd write them down on a piece of paper or put them in an email or something else to remember the passwords. And that's how the passwords got compromised. Of course, and then the easy way to compromise somebody's password is just spoof them, come in and pretend you're their boss, their coworker, or the IT organization, and ask them for their credentials. And being a loyal employee and undertrained, a lot of people provided those credentials, and the end result was a breach. And so you'd have these companies that spent millions of dollars on security. They were getting breached by relatively low-level attacks that were coming in and compromising those passwords. Really, nobody should be using passwords now, and yet predominantly that's what we're using to get in and out of stuff. And as I say, only recently have we really made a major effort, driven by Microsoft, to eliminate passwords and move to a permanent multi-factor authentication schema. And multi-factor means, and everybody should be using multi-factor on social media, by the way, but multi-factor means that you might have a password to get in, but it always comes back, either challenges through your cell phone where it gives you a code and you enter in that code to pass, or you use an authentication application, the most common being Authenticator from Microsoft, but there's several of them out there. And that application, using an encrypted connection, validates you are who you say you are. There are other efforts that say use your smartphone as that second factor. Just being in proximity to the machine with your smartphone says that you are who you are, but it's always used in concert with something else. And the other thing we've developed relatively recently over the last 10 years, the idea that when you walk away from your PC, it locks and secures itself, and it doesn't unsecure itself until you come back. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard stories of somebody gets up from their desk. In fact, sadly, I did this when I was a young employee at IBM. But get up from your desk, and somebody comes in and hoses up your machine. I'm kind of surprised I didn't get fired. I went in one time when my boss got up and left for lunch. I went in and loaded an application on his machine that dropped all the characters off the screen over time. So he'd be typing, and the characters would cascade off the screen and pool at the bottom. I thought that was hilarious. Today, you do something like that, there's a pretty good chance you get fired for it, because the applications I was using to do that, they could have been malware. I mean, I was just being stupid. So in the end, you really have to treat security very seriously. The companies to watch, NVIDIA just, by the way, at their latest conference, just announced a security solution using an enhanced artificial intelligence. But up before then, you're talking about companies like Cylance, which belongs to BlackBerry, and Deep Instinct, which is a firm out of Israel, both of which were using deep learning and machine learning programs to monitor and, as I say, attack the bad behavior as opposed to looking specifically at the program. And by using an AI, they were able to identify on zero-day attacks. They could identify within a couple of minutes the attack was going on and curtail it. So thefts went from being, multi-million-dollar thefts to being $100, $1,000 thefts, because they catch it so quick. And that really represents the current thinking. The current concern is an AI-based program, which we haven't seen yet, at least not that I'm aware of, on the attack side. That's an advanced AI that goes in and penetrates using the same technology. And of course, as we move to quantum computing, the biggest concern is we're well aware that once we finally get an active quantum computer, and we're about 10 years out, we can do quantum computers in simulation. However, NVIDIA just demonstrated they can develop in simulation up to 1,600 qubits, and that's a viable platform for doing quantum, but it's not yet in quantum speeds, but it's doing quantum calculations. And so that means when we have quantum computers, we will have programmers and capability and programs that will be able to run on them, and some of those programs will be programs that are designed to compromise security, specifically breach encryption. It's believed that a quantum computer could breach the heaviest encryption we have in a matter of minutes. And the only way to secure against a quantum attack is with a quantum defense. And the advantage to a quantum defense is that in a quantum environment, you can tell if data has been observed. So if in transmission, the quantum element identifies that the data has been observed, you can either block the element, or you know that you've been compromised, and you can take remedial action immediately. That is something we cannot do now. So in the end, security is a mess of layers. The biggest layer, the biggest problem has historically been people, and it is the one area we spend the least bit of time on. We should be training our people. Everybody should be trained on security protocol. I mean, I'll go back to one more example, and then I'll move on to another speaker. Back at IBM, it was, in theory, it was a termination offense to let somebody tailgate you through security gates. Like most companies that were technology oriented, we had secured access that either used a key card, could be a key in a small environment, but often it was a key card. And the way people got access is they just follow somebody else that keyed in. And invariably, even though you could get fired for doing it, when we did a security audit, we would find top executives were regularly letting people follow them in through doors, because they kind of figured that the security rules didn't apply to them because they were a senior executive. And that's the kind of behavior you have to train out of people when they're lower level employees, because if they carry it as executive, it gets pretty hard to take a senior VP or, by God, a CEO on the carpet for security violations. The one big security audit I had as I left internal audit was finding that the chief executive of my division was not following security protocol. And we called it out, but it pretty much ended my career as an internal auditor. So in the end, we really need to focus a lot more on the human element here. If you can eliminate the human element as a threat, right now you probably can eliminate about 70% of your exposure. All the rest of the technology you layer on top is good for the rest of the 30%, but does you very little good if you're still compromised by an individual. And remember, one of the biggest breaches we had here in the U.S. was Snowden, an administrator that had escalated privileges that nobody was watching, and he was able to strip a whole bunch of confidential information out and share it with the world. And that should have never been able to happen, even though you could argue what he did probably did a lot of good in the end. So just be aware, people are the biggest threat, and chances are, if you get compromised, you'll be the cause.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Mr. David Smith rightly highlighted the discipline of social engineering, as well as cybersecurity. I think more ordinary people, no matter how much or how little they use tech and how integrated it is in their lives, either more or less, such ordinary people should educate themselves about social engineering as well as cybersecurity. Social engineering, for one thing, isn't limited to technology and has been used for millennia, longer than by the time the first computers or calculating engines were even constructed. So I suppose studying social engineering and its techniques is a way to help safeguard one's mind, character, personhood, free will, soul even, whatever. Moving on, one effect I have mentioned before in previous episodes about this topic or similar topics or discussions where the issue of security and cybersecurity was highlighted. It's a chicken and egg effect where big tech cybersecurity gets more secure and more sophisticated, but then again, to match it, hacking techniques and infiltration races to catch up with all that to match that sophistication, and then big tech, governmental and authoritative defenses advance further to outmatch and outrun hackers and hacking groups, until the next time that the hacking groups become more advanced. And of course, it becomes more, it's a feedback loop, it becomes more nuanced when certain groups and individuals of people employed in big tech lead double lives or triple lives, even leading to a grey hacker lifestyles, shades of grey and myriad spectrum shades of grey, like Neo in the Matrix. That's some feedback effects that I find quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, I just want to share that 1 December, we have our another exclusive event with Rwanda government and corporations. Beside that, we already get confirmations, 12 ministry from Rwanda: Ministry of ICT, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Youth and Cultures, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Local Governments, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Infrastructure, Foreign Affairs, as well as their president, Mr. Carl Kagmans. They will attend in World Talent Economy Forum's program as audience, as well as they will attend in our open dialogues. Beside that, there is a policy level training, public-private partnership. So World Talent Economy Forums with our speakers, those who are our board of advisor, our scientific committee member. Uh, so we will share they will attend in the program, like what we did with this Malaysia climate change department. Same thing we will do with the Rwanda government, and we ensure 12 ministry, 15 ambassadors, largest corporations and academy, they will join in this program. It will be highly exclusive program for developing nations, and hopefully it will be very interesting for all of us. So I request those who want to join, because this is very open forum. We are moving like a open source mode. Those who want to join as a speakers, already we have a very big panel, so they can confirm that and they will join with us. And if someone want to train their government officials and the bankers and the corporation, they can train. Uh, so we are actually moving forward with all of our initiative. This is our second initiative with Rwanda, and the third things we will do with India. So already we are collaborating with some large corporations in India as well. So next 12 months, it will be very interesting. And according to my commitment and World Talent Economy Forum commitments, many governments, largest corporation from developing nations, largest university grant commissions, all of them actually collaborating with World Talent Economy Forum. Perhaps it will be one of the largest initiative for public-private collaboration, as well as definitely it will be great knowledge sharing session. And yes, we will move forward and we will help the developing nation, and this way we will minimize the gap in between developed nations and developing nations. So if you have any questions and other thing, we are working hard, our team actually working hard. So Mr. Adam, you're also working with our core team. Maybe we will give you more opportunity, and we have our honorable speakers. So speakers always helpful for World Talent Economy Forum. So
So send Adam a new microphone.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. We will go for fundraising for him. Yeah, this is your plan. So we will do it. So no problem. So no problem. And this is really, really great discussion. I just want to ensure after 1 hour, 1 year, 6 months, 1.5 hour years, I can say that now many developing countries, governments, and the corporation and the academies, they start to believe how World Talent Economy Forum contributing. This is very, very important. So this is our second largest event with Rwanda governments, and we will ensure their president and all of the minister will attend in our event as an audience, as well as they will attend in our open dialogue. So thank you everyone for joining today's session, and especially the audience, those who observing regularly World Talent Economy Forum open dialogues and our training program. So you can share our content with your government, with corporation, and with academy. So I directly want to go for concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor David Schumacher.
Well, as always, Sharif, another great show. Great discussion today. Enjoyed and got something out of each and every one of the panelists. So not only do I come to talk, but I come to listen. Thanks very much. Concluding remarks. Educate yourself wherever you fit into the security of your company, your own personal life, how much responsibility you take for that. Start with education. Remember the basics, the fundamentals, put them in place, have a plan, test that plan. That's probably an answer to a lot of the questions that we had in the chat today. How do you prevent? How do you minimize? Those are the things that will do that, and that's the thoughts that I'll leave you with.
Thank you, Professor David Schumacher. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks?
As multiple of us have said today, look at your security in layers. Protect your device, protect your network in interfaces, protect your data, encrypt your data. People are the biggest risk. Most of the cybersecurity attacks target people and their weaknesses. Keep up to date. Training is so important. All of the major cybersecurity certifications all of the certifications like HIPAA, iTrust, NIST Common Security Framework, all of those require training of the end users. Training is very, very important. A lot of jobs in cybersecurity, a lot of unfilled positions in cybersecurity. And it's not just professional cyber criminals who are getting involved now. We had one of my websites attacked by a really very low level ransomware attack. It took us less than 15 minutes to recover from it. But when we ran the reverse forensics on it, we discovered the person in Russia who did it, even his street address, even the MAC address of the machine he used to launch the attack. And I hate to say this, but his machine had a reverse ransomware attack on it without a place to buy the ransomware key. It's easy to do. This person was very poor at it. And, you know, it didn't make sense to turn them in even. It just made sense to take them off the air. And it's easy to do. That, with it being that easy, attacks are happening to everyone. I can guarantee if you go and look at your router logs at your home today, you're going to see you were scanned at least 100 times. And it's there, be aware for it. It's not if you're going to be hacked, it's when you're going to be hacked. And that's really the equation that's out there today.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Rob.
Sure. Well, let's see, wrapping up on security. The most interesting breach I ran into over the last couple of years was with a large pharmaceutical company. And what had happened is the attackers had come in, compromised a password and ID, and then pulled data very slowly. So they were below the detection threshold for the company for a year. And they got all the information on every single employee. And then they issued a memo that looked like it came from executive management, only sent the memo to people that were below executive management, so they weren't aware that the memo was false. And that memo said the company had just been acquired, and that everybody had to submit, if they wanted to get paid, they needed to submit their personal information, social security number, their banking information, all the rest of it. So for direct deposit, and that way they would assure that they would get paid, and almost everybody in the company did. Eventually, somebody asked their manager what the hell was going on, and they shut it down. By that time, however, the attacker had vanished. The attacking site had vanished. The information had been fully captured, and every single employee in the company now was open to identity theft. It was one of the largest breaches, probably in the history of this country. And if you never read about it, it's because the company never reported it. There lies one of the biggest problems we have right now with regard to security. Many of the really big breaches are not being reported, and that means we're not building defenses against them. That means the people that have been individually harmed may not be aware that they've been harmed, and that aspect of this is very troubling, because if you don't know of a problem, you can't come up with a remedy. And so as we go forward, it's going to be very important for governments to require the reporting of breaches. Now, I said reporting. One of the most annoying, most troubling things that the U.S. government did a while back was this idea of digitally connecting everybody so that the systems themselves could report the breach. The problem with doing digital connections for reporting is those same connections can be used for breach as well. And the government has not proven to be particularly invulnerable to breaches either. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to create a bigger problem than the one you're trying to correct. And all companies are not secured equally. So if you create trusted links between these companies, all it takes is somebody breaching the least secure of everybody in that trusted link, and then you can breach everybody in that link. So as you think through security, think through the consequences of your remedy and make sure the remedy doesn't make you less secure than you already are. Digital links are problematic. One more story before I leave you. At IBM, I was part of a large effort to create the most secure site that had ever been created, and we did. It was a brilliant site, air-gapped where possible. The most advanced technology we could think of for authentication of the users. The everything was encrypted, and then we hired an ex-CIA guy to breach into the site. He didn't even try. After 2 days, he breached, but he breached by going into following the trusted links and going into a company that had a trusted link that wasn't secure and following that trusted link into the secure site and then breaching the secure site. He didn't even touch our security. He went after the partner site that was not secure. And so the lesson here is you are only as secure as your weakest link. And if you don't know what that weakest link is, trust me, somebody attacking can probably figure it out. And the end result is you're going to be breached. So be aware of the exposure, be aware of the fact that your employees often are your weakest link. And if you're not spending a lot of time keeping your employees trained, chances are you're going to get breached.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks?
Well, the question of security is really fundamental. It goes far beyond the cyber domain. What you're really doing is a risk versus benefit calculation. And I think it would be so effective and great if children were taught this very early on in life, how to assess the accurate risk and benefits of any given situation. I had a roommate that used to joke when he heard about identity theft, he'd imitate Mr. T and say, "I pity the fool to try to steal my identity." So, I mean, this is actually, one method you can take is don't be a high value target. Make yourself as innocuous as possible. That's interesting proposition. I don't know. There's probably multiple ways to go about that, but we have the ability now with the Internet of Things to really implement a kind of fusion of democracy and capitalism that I think was I've talked about Henry George before, but really when you take something from nature that you didn't create, it would make sense if you paid a market value rent on that thing, and this rent would go back to the commons to fund things like courts and defense and all the minimal services that keep civilization running. And it occurs to me we have the ability to do that with the current level of digital progress in society. Whether or not we will is a question, but ultimately, if you don't have skin in the game, like an ownership-based society and a merit-based society provides, you tend to get into this problem of a nameless, faceless, permanent deep state of bureaucrats that really don't. They're just following orders, and they really don't always come up with the best outcomes for how to create a good society. So anyway, there's something I think could be explored down the road as an offshoot of risk benefit and cybersecurity, but it's something that I'm interested in developing, and we'll see where that goes. And thanks for the chance to participate in this forum today.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. What's your concluding remarks?
Thank you, Sharif. Always prepare for the worst case scenario. Already said. It isn't a case of if, it's when. Always prepare for the worst. Don't tempt fate. Just imagine how rotten you'd feel if you lost something you've been working on for months or years, or savings you've been saving up for your children and grandchildren. The sense of loss is something that just breaks my heart, and I've been there myself, not necessarily from a cyber attack, but just loss of data from not backing something up. The effort required to back something up or safeguard your data from attack is always preferable to that sense of loss or that feeling of violation. Thank you.
Thank you. This is actually really great session for our audience. Thank you for joining today's session. Thank you, Professor David Schumacher, Professor David Smith, Mr. Dan, Professor Rob, and Mr. Adam for joining today's sessions. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.